Welcome to the Better Workday podcast with me, Niamh. In this episode, I want to discuss how we can work better with our colleagues so we can create a better workday for both ourselves and them. Because here's the thing, you could be the most organised, productive, meticulous person in your organisation. But if you can't communicate and collaborate well with others, everything can be a little bit more difficult. And when I work with teams, regardless of the sector, the type of company, the culture, the level, any of those things, the biggest shifts always come from how we can improve, how we work together, how we can develop those relationships at work. Now, this is the final part of my short series around the Better Workday framework, and it's the final element of the framework I'm sharing. So just to recap, in case you didn't have a chance to listen to the past few weeks, we spoke about role clarity, around how we manage our time, our attention and our energy. And now we're talking about how we manage work relationships. And I'll have to be honest with you, when I first started building the A Better Workday workshop, which was the very first workshop I designed to try and help people to be more productive without burning out, I didn't have anything around managing your relationships with other people in it. I was really focused on how you manage your own workload, how you manage yourself. And it was over the years, as I delivered the sessions time and time again, that I noticed that there was a huge piece missing. Because as I've said, you can be really organised, but if you're not able to work well with others, then that causes a whole host of problems. You rely on other people for input so that you can do your job. They rely on you for input, advice, guidance, decision-making. And so that flow of communication and information through our work is what really makes sure things get done. So in this episode, I want to share two different ideas with you. The first is my relationship matrix, which sounds kind of technical, but it's not really. It's just a set of questions that I recommend people use to think about the different relationships at work and how they can work better with people. And then I want to share a different approach to improving how you communicate and collaborate with others at work. Okay, so it's not going to be too heavy an episode. This is being released towards the end of June, so I don't want to be talking about anything too heavy as we head into the summer months. So we'll keep it light, but we'll keep it purposeful. And as always, I'd love it if you tried something new as a result of this episode. So first, my matrix. The relationship matrix is a framework that I share with people one-to-one or in teams that helps you map out the key relationships at work. So that for you might be your manager, maybe another leader, and perhaps the 3 to 4 people that you work most closely with. It's not for mapping out the relationship between every single person who you email or who are in meetings with you, but the ones who you work with most often or have the most influence on your role. And for each of those people, I'd like you to think about the following questions. And if you're listening to this while you're driving or walking, just listen to it and let it sink in, I suppose, and maybe come back to it later on when you're at a desk so that you can maybe jot down some notes, okay? So the first question I'd ask is, what is their role? And I don't mean their job title. I mean their role in relation to your work. For example, you might have somebody who works in another department on your list. They're not a leader, they're an individual contributor, but their role in relation to your job is that they give you key information, key input into your work, and you can't do your job if they don't do theirs. You might have people there who are involved in making decisions for your projects and all those kind of things. So think beyond the job title, think beyond whether the person is a manager, a leader, anything like that, but what is their role in your work? And that's really important, because the next two questions are, how much influence do they have over your work? And how much interest do they have in your work? Going back to that first example, there might be somebody in another department whose work feeds directly into yours. So they have a lot of influence over your job. If they don't do their work, you can't do yours. But what if they had very little interest in the work that you do? Well, then that's a relationship that you have to be very proactive in managing, because you have to make sure you get the information you need. And then on the other hand, you might have somebody on your list who's, for example, a mentor. They have a medium influence on your role because they're not directly involved in it per se, they're just giving you guidance, but they have a high level of interest in you. And so you're going to approach that relationship very differently to the first one. And what we're doing here is we're taking a step back and considering, who are these people in relation to your workday to your efforts to getting things done, and considering where are you on their to-do list. Because I'll have to tell you, I learned a lesson a good couple of years back now when I was in a role and I was not on the top of anyone's to-do list. My work was way down. So even though it was really important for me, it wasn't that important for them. And knowing that and acknowledging it didn't change the situation, but it did change how I spoke and communicated to those people, how I framed my requests, how I structured my follow-ups, all those things. And so it meant that I got what I needed more easily, not from forcing myself up to the top of their priorities, but by being aware of the current situation and doing my best within those constraints. So what is their level of interest and what is their level of influence? And then you might ask yourself the next pair of questions, which is how can they help you and how could they block you? Now, I'm going to pause and say sometimes I actually fill out these questions by having a conversation with the other person, especially if someone on your list is your manager or another leader, because they might be able to help you in ways that you simply don't know. And if you ask them, you might learn something new. But also, they're sometimes not aware of how they block you. You might have a manager who is very invested in you, who really wants to support you, who's got a lot of knowledge that they can share, and all those wonderful things. But if they're not available because they're being pulled into other projects and they've got a lot of other commitments, then they might block you by simply not being timely in their responses or not being available when you need them. That's not intentional on their side, but it is a risk for you to manage. And so when you ask that question, either to the other person or you reflect on it yourself, again, you become aware of the reality of that relationship and how you can make the most of it. So here we are, we know what their role is in relation to your work, their level of influence and interest, whether they can help you or block you or both. And then you ask the question, what is their preferred communication style? And now you really can only find this out by asking the person, by the way. Do they prefer quick emails, MS Teams, an informal call, a structured meeting? How do they like to communicate? Because even though you'll have your own style and your team will have your own communication norms, and that works well most of the time, if you need input from somebody, if you need them to get back to you, if you need that decision, and if they're not being responsive, that's when knowing and communicating their way in their preferred channel and their preferred style can really make a difference. So you might prefer MS Teams all day long, but if you're working with somebody who likes to have a 15-minute phone call and you need them, then that's when you jump onto their way of communicating. And that's the set of questions that you would ask yourself. And knowing that then, taking a little bit of time, I suppose, to consider that for your top, we'll say 5 to 7 contacts at work, you can then say, how am I going to communicate better with them going forward, knowing what I know? And you might not make huge changes. It might just be an extra phone call here, a more detailed email there, maybe different timing, those kind of things. And the good news is, if you take this considered approach, it's probably going to benefit both of you. So it really is a win-win. And that brings me to the second point of this episode, which is really how to improve communication and collaboration with your colleagues. And what I want you to know is, whenever I ask people, how can other people help you create a better workday? Everyone tells me, I'd love it if they were better communicators. I'd love it if they responded to my emails when I needed it. I'd love it if they took time to prepare their meetings better. And I totally understand that. But how about if we flipped it for just a minute? What if, instead of you focusing on trying to send better messages, that you tried to do that for sure, but also you decided to try and be a better listener? That instead of you only looking for other people to respond to you when you need it, that you tried to be more responsive and more available for your colleagues. In other words, what if we focused on both directions of the relationship instead of just focusing on what we need from other people? Because as I say time and time again, I know it's frustrating when other people interrupt you, but I'm sure you have to interrupt other people to get your job done. I know it can be annoying when other people schedule meetings and they're underprepared, but I'm guessing there's been at least one meeting in your career that you have rushed, that you haven't been prepared for. And so I'm not saying that anyone is right or wrong in this. I'm saying that if we want to improve our relationships at work, we have to start asking the question, how can I help others create a better workday? What changes can I make to help their workday flow more easily so they can get their job done? Because a lot of the people that I work with have interdependent roles. So if your colleagues are able to work more smoothly, then surely it's going to benefit you as well. And so maybe one thing you'll do differently after this episode is take a look at how you can listen more attentively in meetings, how you can be more present in conversations, how you can show up to the meeting prepared to support the other person if, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to prepare as well as they'd like. And maybe try that approach, while also, of course, considering how you can communicate more clearly and all of that stuff. Because the thing about relationships is they are two-way. We can't ask people to give us everything we need for our role and forget that they too have a plate full of things to do, worries to resolve, and a whole host of things that have got nothing to do with work. What do you think? Is that something you consider over the weeks ahead? I hope it is. Now, as I wrap up this message, I'm going to let you know that I am taking my summer break from the podcast. You know, I usually just end up taking a break and not announcing it. But I think if you've been listening to the podcast a while now, you know that I tend to drift off during certain times of the year. And so I'm letting you know this time. I'm going to take July and August off. I'm really looking forward to spending time with the family and doing lots of things outside of work, as well as a bit of delivery, of course. And then I'll be back to you in September with new ideas, new topics. And with that in mind, do get in touch if there's something that you'd like me to cover. You can find our email in the description of this episode. And until then, have a lovely summer, stay well, and have a better workday.